Of all of the prevalent diseases, which still take thousands of lives each year, few strike as much raw animalistic fear in the mind as rabies. The rabies virus still claims over 50,000 lives each year worldwide, and the fear surrounding it has led to folklore and legends from centuries ago right up until the modern day. In medieval times, the sight of a person afflicted with rabies even led folk to give understandable merit to stories of ghouls and vampires, which are passed on through every generation. The symptoms of rabies are commonly thought to be the cliched foaming at the mouth and extreme rage, which in more modern times naturally led to the concept of zombies in literature and movies. The full extent of the symptoms, however, is unknown to most, and the true nature of this horrific disease is enough to make anyone who suffers from it lose their mind. The virus causes the victim's brain to swell to the point of outgrowing their skull, which creates an overload of pressure on the brain itself. This, in turn, causes an increased sensitivity to light and other sensory input, all of which become heightened to the point of being painful to the subject. To a rabies sufferer, even water becomes an enemy, causing extreme pain when swallowed, which in turn causes aggressive salivation and foaming at the mouth from dehydration, and when in combination with the affected mental state, causes the sufferer to have an extreme aversion to water, to the point of causing distress and anger. A person who has contracted rabies will typically show recognizable symptoms after 1 to 3 months of infection, but in some cases it can take only a week, and in others a full year. On September 31st, 1991, however, a so-called variant strain of rabies was seemingly discovered in the Canary Islands at the Costa Adeje hospital after an 11-year-old boy was bitten by a bat while on holiday with his family. He was immediately taken to the hospital as a precaution, even though the whole family had already received their rabies shots. Within 24 hours of admission to the hospital, it became clear to the staff on hand that this was no traditional case of rabies. The onset of similar symptoms occurred much more rapidly than typically expected, with the boy, who remains nameless at the request of the family, having visceral aggressiveness toward nurses who tried to give him drinks. What the doctors eventually noticed, however, caused them to enlist outside help from the WHO, World Health Organization. They had noticed that after 22 hours of being bitten, the boy had developed severe depressions in his skin on numerous places over his body, including his arms, legs, chest and back. These depressions were raw and extremely painful as he lashed out when staff examined them. After the WHO arrived at the hospital within 48 hours of the initial bite, they ascertained that these depressions were in fact being caused by a breakdown of tissue beneath the epidermis, which was in turn causing the outer layer of skin to sag over the empty area where flesh had been. These depressions grew rapidly in size and frequency all over his body, and after 76 hours of torment, the boy died of organ failure. And after the family granted permission to give an autopsy, it was found that his liver, intestines, lungs, and even parts of his brain had almost completely wasted away from the virus, as if he had decomposed while still alive. The only relieving outcome of this event was that no other cases were reported, since skin contact with the patient didn't lead to infection. The bat population in the cave where the boy had been playing was culled to avoid further infection, and further traces of the strain were found in 6% of the bat population, which leads experts to believe that the strain may have still been in its infancy. The most curious thing about this unusual strain, however, is that it was most likely not rabies at all, since it was later confirmed by the WHO that the DNA of this virus was an exact match to that of the fungus found in the Russian Mir space station in 1988, which was confirmed by microbiologist Natalia Novikova to be a highly aggressive fungi which feeds on plastic, glass and even some metals, and was highly reactive to UV light, which initially caused it to thrive on the window of the space station and even began to degrade its windows and hull to the point of putting the cosmonauts in danger of ship integrity failure. To this day, there is only one reported case of this viral infection, which itself seems to have mutated from or even arrived on the fungus aboard the Mir space station as a sort of piggyback through space. The origins of this virus and fungi are still unknown to this day.